The Detroit Lions made 3 Georgia Bulldogs very happy last week when they selected them in the NFL draft. Tate Ratledge, Dominic Lovett, and Dan Jackson are all headed to Detroit. What's been a theme in the NFL recently? The Packers getting a lot of Georgia guys. The Eagles getting a lot of Georgia guys. That's worked out for them in building a very, very good roster that's competing and winning Super Bowls. But what the Lions GM had to say most recently in a press conference after they selected those 3 Georgia Bulldogs, it was about Georgia's practices. And we hear so much about Georgia's practices and about how it's intense, it's different, it is more difficult than the games, it's harder than other places. We've heard so many different things. Go back to 2021 and that Georgia defense that was elite and was just destroying teams. They talked about how it was easier out there on the field during the games than it is on Bloody Tuesday in practice, than it is on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, whichever day it is. Georgia goes hard on the practice field, and that is part of the large formula with a lot of different pieces to make Georgia successful. But I think that that's one of the most important pieces for Kirby Smart and this program. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. Here is what the GM had to say. This is what he had to say. Before I got this job, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia for a long time, just scouting the Southeast. And then when the Rams moved out to LA, I just kind of stayed in Atlanta. But obviously, I've been to Georgia practices a lot and been around that program a lot. It's unlike anything else that I've seen in life, that I've seen live in terms of a college practice and in terms of just the intensity. He hasn't seen anything like it, he said. He goes on to say, when you can go through that kind of regimen and you practice like that, you know they are ready. So I've talked about this. I definitely talked about it a year ago, and I've talked about it a little bit recently. But part of why Georgia players are getting drafted, and Georgia just led the draft with 13 guys. They got 15 guys taken a few years ago. They had 10 guys taken a few years ago. I think they had 12. They are just locking and loading and sending NFL players off and NFL players off. And I think that a big part of this doesn't have anything to do with the talent. It comes from the fact that they went to Georgia. It comes from the fact that they have these regimens, that they are being prepared at a different level. They talk about that with Nick Saban. Nick Saban, Alabama, they were crushing the drafts, right, during the 2010s. Another thing that the Lions said. Nick Saban at Alabama was very similar, but just the intensity, the physicality, the detail, the tempo, the whole thing, just the energy. I mean, they've been comparing Kirby Smart to Nick Saban in a lot of ways over the last few years, but one of them that is happening a lot is now during this NFL draft process because they are spitting guys out left and right. Look, when we talk about these 3 particular Georgia Bulldogs that the Lions just got, they got Tate Ratledge, Dominic Lovett, and Dan Jackson, right? With Tate, you got a guy who Kirby, after the Sugar Bowl, sat up there at the press conference. They lost to Notre Dame. Their season's over. The 2 guys that were up there with them played their last game in a Georgia uniform, Tate Ratledge and Jalen Walker. And he talked about how those 2 guys get so many more votes than the rest of the people to be the team captains, and that the character is what mattered the most for him. All right, so that's what you get with Tate Ratledge. Tate Ratledge is a guy who went through injuries, probably stayed at Georgia longer than he was planning to, really, really cared about the red and black. That's what they want at the NFL level. Guys that are willing, look, because at the end of the day, it is more about the organization than it is about you in the NFL, even more so than in college. And they want that to translate to the next level. With Dominic Lovett, he recognized, hey, what's happening in Missouri is not enough for me. I want to go to Georgia to get better. So that's what he went and did. With Dan Jackson, what is one of the reasons why a team would want to draft Dan Jackson? Well, he was the one knocking down Georgia's door saying, put me on the team, not vice versa. It wasn't, hey, Dan Jackson, come play for us. He fought for a spot on the team. Then he fought to walk his way to go from just being a walk-on and just being a practice dummy to participating in special teams and getting in real packages on defense. on one of the best defenses of all time in college football in 2021, dealing with injuries, coming back, being a starter, being an impact player, and then he gets drafted to the NFL. Other GMs, other coaches, they say this. I like to reference what the Texans said last year after they talked about drafting Kamari Lassiter very, very early in the second round. They just said, when you get a Georgia guy, you know they're going to be ready. So it's another recruiting pitch. I talked about how this NFL draft is a good recruiting pitch for Kirby Smart last week when I pointed out, hey, look, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins doesn't have much production. He barely played for Georgia. What was he, a 4th, 5th round pick? Warren Brinson, not a lot of production. He gets drafted. Jalen Walker, 1st round pick. Mykel Williams, underproduced. Malachi Starks regressed, right? 1st round picks. So it's one of those things where that's part of the recruiting pitch. Hey, you get to the NFL, but the other part of the recruiting pitch is look at how badly these teams want Georgia players because you went through our program. You went through what we had to do. This is what Kirby Smart could be saying. That is a big part of it. And that's one of the selling points to the parents is we're going to develop these people as young men. Now, I'm not saying this only happens at Georgia. I've never said that. But apparently practice is different at Georgia. It reminds me of something I talked to y'all about about 3 weeks ago. Actually, probably 3 weeks ago exactly. Georgia brought in some transfers. They brought in a lot of transfers, actually. And I think a handful of them are going to be impact players. 2 of them in particular are wide receivers, Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch. They just came from Texas A&M, another SEC school, and USC, a team that is coached by Lincoln Riley, someone who's viewed as one of the best coaches in the country. When Zachariah Branch was asked about adjusting to Georgia's practice, he didn't compare it to USC. He compared it to high school at Bishop Gorman, one of the better high schools out there in terms of producing athletics and especially on the football level. And he said Georgia has the same pedigree, it's an established culture. Noah Thomas talked about how the practice tempo was one of the biggest things he had to adjust to, how Georgia keeps it so high energy. There's no one ever just standing around. Everyone's always moving. They get better every day, and that's why he went to Georgia. So, look, it's easy when you're coming from, and I'm not calling those lesser programs, but look, Elo Modozi just came from Army, right? Dominic Lovett came from Missouri. Those are examples of, hey, this place is not preparing me the way that a Georgia could. Let me go over there. And, I'll also be getting to play in the Sugar Bowl. I'll get to play in the SEC Championship. I'll get to compete for national championships. I'll get to win a lot. It all goes hand in hand. And the NFL has recognized the last 5 years that Georgia has built something. It's built an NFL machine. It's built a perennial contender. And it has a lot of really talented players who, that's not the only reason why they want to draft these guys. They want to draft them a big portion of because they're prepared. Kamari Lassiter was prepared to be a pro. Dan Jackson proved everyone wrong, and he just got drafted to the NFL. Tate Ratledge is a plug-and-play starter at the NFL level. They are prepared partially because of the talent, partially because of what they had to go through at Georgia, getting better and better every single day, as Noah Thomas would talk about it. And look, when you... there's a reason why programs are doubling down on these guys. The Steelers doubled down. They got Darnell Washington and Broderick Jones a few years back. They want more than one of them. Mike Tomlin's got a good relationship in Athens. The Lions just got 3 dogs in one draft. The Eagles dipped back into the Georgia pool again this season, and they went and they got Smile Mondon. I don't know if Smile Mondon's really going to see much of the field, but they want him in there because he's talented, because he fits the culture, and because of the chemistry he'll have with the other guys, with Nakobe Dean and Jalen Carter and all of those players. The Packers, Eric Stokes, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker. Wouldn't be surprised if they go back for more. They did. They went and they got Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson this year. Programs are going after Georgia guys over and over and over again. It tells you what you need to know. Thank you for watching. Links are down below.